Little did I know that such a crazy week lay ahead, all stemming from a trip to my favourite charity shop. Just as I arrived for some bargain hunting, unbelievably, a dishevelled cat crossed my path. He was discoloured, with matted fur, and looked elderly. It was clear something was wrong. Even with treats, I couldn't get close. Then he just disappeared. I returned the next day to see if anyone knew the cat. It didn't take me long to find a helpful lady who filled me in.
I do see him about, but he's not friendly. He keeps himself to himself. He doesn't seem to want to come near you.
Yeah, I think most of them get a bit scared, and they
might have been out a long while, but I know which one you're talking about.
Well.
But as far as I'm aware, he don't belong to anybody, so...
Okay, well... She goes on to explain she sees him out in all weathers, often soaked through.
And it was out in the rain. It was absolutely soaked.
After speaking to a few more locals, I learned he slept in a burnt-out building behind the charity shop. I tried to find a way in, but it was completely fenced off, as it was deemed unsafe. Workers told me there were a few dead cats inside, as they could jump in, but not out. The problem had now been fixed, but I was concerned he was sleeping with the bodies, not only distressing, but a health hazard. Next day, I headed back to continue door knocking to see if he had an owner. As I parked, someone said hello, but unfortunately, not the right cat. It wasn't going to be that easy. I went back to a house I tried yesterday. There were cat bowls outside, and I had a feeling this is who I needed to talk to. Still no answer though, so I put a note through the door. Then, as I was preparing to leave, I saw the matted cat. I quickly got some food. He looked me straight in the eye, thought about it, and then he's off again. Baby? He was heading for a gap in the fence, and I knew I had to get in front of him. I couldn't believe it. He stopped to eat and immediately let me pat him. He was thin. Underneath all that matted fluff, I could feel his ribs. I discreetly glanced. It appeared he was unneutered. Then, as I served more food, he came back and thankfully let me scan him for a microchip. There wasn't one. While I was on a roll, I thought I'd pick him up for the agreeability test to see how friendly he was. I needed to gauge his personality to match him with the right adopter. Good boy. Well, I'd give him a generous 5 out of 10, but pretty amazing considering. Suddenly, I felt hopeful. Just as I was about to leave, I got a message. Andrew, the man at the house I put the note through, asked me to drop in as he desperately needed help. My sense that this was a stray cat hub was right. As soon as I stepped inside, I was greeted by this little king of the jungle. A few weeks ago, Andrew allowed a pregnant cat inside, and she successfully gave birth. She was a stray whose previous litter now lived in the garden. Beautiful girl. Here's the mum. I didn't want to stress her, but needed to see how friendly she was, as Andrew would like me to find her and her kittens a rescue space. Let's go. Let me have a little pet with you. She moved away from where the kittens were hiding as to protect them from me. Such a good mum. I was pleased to see she immediately appreciated affection.
Hello, you guys.
I also tested that the kittens were good with human contact. Mum kept checking that I was being careful with her babies. I tried my best to reassure her. Andrew was completely overwhelmed with cats and had asked many charities, but no one could help.
Hello, little ones. Hello. And I don't think anyone will be able to say no to you. Beautiful. Aren't you? Come on. No, sure, they're such beautiful kittens. We can find you a home. Can't we? We can. We can.
I headed home knowing I'd have to work quickly. Andrew's windows were being replaced in a couple of days, and I was worried Mum would be scared off. Also, the kittens could get crushed when tradesmen moved the furniture. Next day, I got a message from locals, Chiara and her mum, Alessandra. They knew all about the matted cat, and I really appreciated their ongoing help. His name was Pierre. He was 14 years old, and he left home when his owner got a dog. The owner wouldn't speak to me directly, only through Chiara. She gave me permission to find him a forever home. I got some good footage of Pierre for his social media adoption post. I did wonder if he knew, as he seemed to strike the pose. Shelters were full and I didn't have the facilities, so like my previous rescue of front door cat, and as part of my new project, the plan was to get him adopted directly off the streets. I was looking for an experienced person who would take him on unconditionally and just with the limited information I could glean. The next day felt like I'd taken 2 steps backwards. Pierre just wouldn't come over. After an hour of trying, I thought I'd leave. But then gave it one more go. With a cheeky yawn and a stretch, he moved towards me with the slowest saunter possible. I'm starting to think he's messing with me. Sadly, he didn't get any inquiries from his adoption post. No one was interested, but I understood. Pierre was old and does look worse for wear. It will take a special person. Things were about to get even more furry. Andrew messaged again, this time asking me to scan one of the cats that had been living with him to see if it had a microchip. He'd always been curious. The cat had recently taken to sleeping in his car as she was scared of Mum Cat. This girl turned up 2 years ago with a shaved side as if she'd just been spayed. She was extremely underweight, so Andrew started feeding her. We were both surprised she had a microchip, but we'll have to wait until tomorrow afternoon for the details. This could be interesting. The following morning, I quickly headed back to Andrew's to collect Mum and kittens. After over 100 phone calls, I managed to find a rescue space. It was arranged for me to drop them off at 11 a.m. sharp. Luckily, as soon as I walked in, Mum was right there, but all the doors were open. She could run and hide anywhere. I quickly grabbed her. 1 down, 5 to go. I had 15 minutes to find 5 kittens in what seemed like a haystack. 3 down. Sneaky number 4 was in the hallway. Now just 1 left. But where could it be? Then finally.
Look at you, he's the clever one.
I loaded Mum and kittens and we headed off to the rescue shelter. I got there just in time. All very scary for them, but necessary. Each kitten's gender was checked as they were booked in. This little cutie, who I first met, was the only male. He was called Leo, after the zodiac sign. Worryingly, it was discovered they all had cat flu. It can be very serious, particularly in kittens. I just hoped they would survive. I felt emotional, knowing Mum would be trying to protect her babies. However, I didn't have time to ruminate. The details of Carcat's microchip came in. I was puzzled to see the owner's address was in a village miles away from Andrew's. I decided to drop in after finding the email address and mobile number were out of service. The microchip details stated the cat's name was Clyde. He was a neutered boy, not a girl, and 8 years old. I knocked on the door, just hoping an excited owner would answer.
I just found a black cat.
Instead, I was told she moved out 2 years ago and they had lost her forwarding address.
3 mils.
Nothing was coming easy this week. I headed back to Manchester to feed Pierre. After being stuck in traffic, I was half an hour late and he was nowhere to be seen. I was so worried I had broken our little routine. The next day, he didn't appear again, nor the day after that. Things were also becoming frustrating with Clyde. On the one hand, through hours of detective work, amazingly, I found the owner on social media via her married name. Katie desperately tried to find him, but finally resigned to the fact she'd never see him again. The problem was Andrew was still convinced he was a she and didn't want to give Clyde back. It took days of long phone calls with periodic long silences for Andrew to begrudgingly agree to surrender Clyde, but only on the condition a vet confirmed the gender. The next day I collected him for the vet appointment. I was so upset when I had to grab Clyde as he slept on Andrew's bed and shove him in a carrier. He must have been so confused. The vet confirmed Clyde was Clyde. So I set off to deliver him to Katie, his legal owner. I felt heartbroken for Andrew, who loved him for 2 years. He was devastated. I really felt for Clyde too. He'd been sound asleep in the land of Nod just half an hour ago. Now his life was on a different trajectory. I spotted a little blood inside his nostril and was worried he may not be well.
Aren't you? You're going to be brave. You're going to be braver than me.
He actually was braver than me. He didn't want to be covered and surprisingly enjoyed the attention. I think he knew what was ahead.
Good boy. It's a good boy, don't you?
I pulled up outside Katie's house and reassured him that everything would be okay. She had warned me her husband would be keeping the excited kids in the front room so they didn't scare Clyde. Here we go. As I entered the house, the silence was deafening. Dad was doing a great job.
I don't think he'll remember us. What's going on? Look at you. He's very brave. He's very brave. He was quite timid when we got him the first time, so did warm up to us all a bit. He used to come and lie on the bed and give us cuddles. Are you okay?
Katie told me she adopted Clyde from a charity after his elderly owner could no longer look after him. This poor boy's life had been pillar to post. It didn't take long for him to meet the little ones again. After nearly 4 years missing, they did actually remember him. Katie took him to the vets a couple of days later. He was put on medication for respiratory problems and quickly recovered. There was one major change since 2020, and Katie was worried Clyde might not be pleased. But the two of them instantly bonded. Katie said, originally Clyde was scared of his own shadow, but was now confident after his adventure in the big city. We can only guess 2 of those years were spent as a stray. He'd earned his stripes. The next day, I was so relieved to find Pierre was there, and I sensed he may have been slightly pleased to see me. His adoption posts were now getting inquiries from around the country, but no one close to Manchester. Another day passed, and another. Then an inquiry came in from Arthur and Pam. I went to visit them and they explained all about their previous cat, Tuxie. He was an elderly stray they rescued off the streets. Sadly, the sweet boy had recently passed away, but not before experiencing love. I got back and explained to Pierre that a lovely couple wanted to adopt him. It was a match made in heaven, once in a lifetime, a golden ticket. All he had to do was go in the trap, and I'd chauffeur him to his forever home. It would be that simple. As I headed home, I stopped the car when I saw him. I had heard he crossed this road many times a day. He was so close to getting hit by that bus. I spent the night fretting. The following morning, I arrived with the trap. It was the hottest day of the year so far, and unfortunately, his usual spot was now in blazing sunshine. I put all his favourites in. Then, as is typical with trapping, if there isn't a brass band marching past, there's a bloke with a lawnmower.
Hello! Hello!
I was amazed he actually turned up after all that commotion.
How is it going? Look at you there.
But unfortunately, he rang rings around me. I moved the trap, shaded the trap, covered the trap, put different food in the trap, put catnip in the trap. Nothing worked. I didn't want to just grab him, as if he got away, he'd likely never come near me again. Tomorrow is another day, and I wasn't going to let him outsmart me. It was game on. Next day, I'm feeling weary already. Until damn it. He went the other side of the fence. Luckily, the charity shop gates were open, so I followed him in. This was my last chance before the sunny, long weekend. Arthur and Pam lived by the seaside. If I left it any later, the roads would be solid, with half of Manchester heading to the beach. He knew I couldn't reach him there. Was he teasing me? As soon as I put down the camera, he runs off.
Come here.
Surprisingly, he came out from under the truck. I took a deep breath and scruffed him. It was at this moment he knew old Foxy had outdone him.
Oh, he's a good boy.
I called Arthur and Pam to say we were on our way.
We won't be long.
Like Clyde, he didn't want the carrier covered. He wanted to see and be involved. He'd finally just surrendered. Arthur and Pam lived in a beautiful Welsh coastal town, a world away from city living. They had no dogs or other pets, so this time there'd never be a reason for Pierre not to go home. I managed to stay ahead of traffic and arrived after an hour and a half. Thankfully, Pierre was still calm.
Here you go. Good boy. Let's do that.
He's very dirty.
Hello.
Hello.
He was a big boy, isn't he? Big lad. Tuxie was a big lad, wasn't
I had told them I had to scruff Pierre, but didn't fully explain. I think they thought he was going to be a handful. Everyone takes one step back in anticipation as they open the door and Pierre casually makes his entrance.
Oh. Hello, Ziggy. Oh. Hello, Ziggy. Oh. Hello.
Pierre was quite skillful in playing his audience.
Little head scritches, you love those, but
Yeah.
Hello. This is your place if you want it.
Hello, Ziggy.
I've never seen a tuxie with white fur on his back.
That's for you. Do you want something? Look. I think he's settling in okay. You're a good boy, aren't you? Oh. See, sometimes if we were making something,
Beef brisket.
he'd just, make
Oh,
something.
beef brisket.
He wouldn't
in
put
the
any
slow
step
cooker.
in it until,
Yeah.
it just kept him. Oh.
There's a young lady 2 doors up and we'll get
Oh
that.
yeah, you have a girlfriend up the road, like Tuxie. That's Tuxie's girlfriend.
We'll get that chest of yours looking bright,
Oh,
clean.
he likes it.
Have a fiddle with your ears when the time's right. But for now, we'll just let you settle.
Oh.
There you go.
Within 5 minutes, it was a match made in heaven. Before heading back to Manchester, I got some chips, some fresh air, and a few shells as mementos. What a whirlwind of a week. For cats like Pierre, rehoming them straight off the streets is their last and only chance. I can't just say sorry, I have no space. This type of rescue isn't easy, And it's nervy, as day to day I don't know what will happen, but I so want this project to work. A couple of days later, Arthur and Pam sent some photos. The first night Pierre slept in Tuxie's old spot. By the second night, he was sleeping on their bed.
Oh, he's a good boy.
Here he is a few days later, just back from the vets and still bleary-eyed. Over 2 visits, he was neutered and had all his dirty, matted fur removed. He also had 5 rotten teeth extracted. His blood and urine tests came back showing no problems. This takes real commitment, both financially and emotionally. Thank you, Arthur and Pam.
Hello. Hello, fella. Good boy.
He enjoys the garden, now strutting about full of confidence. No more scurrying around like a scared stray. They call him a character, and trust me, I know exactly what they mean. Clyde fully reacclimatised to family life with 3 youngsters. He is due for a dental and will lose a number of teeth. However, he's enjoying life to the full. The kittens did well to survive the cat flu. After a long recovery time, all 5 and Mum are well. As I speak, they've been put up for adoption, and Mum already has a home waiting for her. I'm thrilled they won't end up as lonely strays giving birth to more homeless kittens. Andrew has had the windows replaced and can now clear his late mother's house while looking after last year's litter.
It's a bit wary.
To see updates on these furry characters, subscribe, and when clicking the bell, select all notifications. As I gear up to venture out on my next rescue, be ready to join me. I wonder who'll be next.